Hello, beautiful world. This is April Davis Campbell, and I am the pastor at Trinity Presbyterian Church in Woodbury, Minnesota. And I am here today with you to share a little bit about lament, giving you a spiritual nourishment for your soul, a 10-minute prayerful pause. And as is sometimes the case, I have Sunny with me. Sunny's taking a little rest right now. So glad she's with us today. Um, as I think about the context that we are all living in, we are under this stress and this fatigue from not only the pandemics of COVID-19 that seems to go on forever, even though there are glimmers of hope out there in terms of vaccine and its distribution. But we also have the pandemic of racism and how that is perpetually causing injustice and grief and um, chaos in so many people's lives. So you throw those together, and then you add a little sprinkle of an election season that has been nothing short of chaotic and stressful as well. It's the perfect storm for us to need a space to rest and a space to abide in God's amazing presence, a space for us to lament. Um, Lament is one of those words that some people use it rather regularly, probably more of the churchy type people. But it's one of those things that it really creates a space for you to just be and know that it is okay. All those feelings that you're having, good, bad, indifferent, whether you're struggling or whether you're celebrating, God is with you in all of that. And when your heart feels so put upon and so weighed down, you can come to God in a space of lament and just cry out to God for some comfort and some assurance, knowing that God is with you in the midst of that. So I would like to start this morning by reading to you from Psalm 137. And today I am reading from the translation Psalms for Praying by Nan C. Merrill, an invitation to wholeness. So listen to God's word and see how it is calling to you this day. Psalm 137. Plunge into the ocean of love where heart meets heart, where sorrows are comforted and wounds are mended. There melodies of sadness mingle with dolphin songs of joy. Past fears dissolve in deep harmonic tones. The future, pure mystery. For eternal moments lived in total surrender glide smoothly over troubled waters. Hide not from love, O friends, sink not into the sea of despair, the mire of hatred. Awaken, O my heart, that I drown not in fear. Too long have I sailed where the winds have blown. Drop anchor. O heart of all hearts, set a clear course that I might follow. Guide me to the promised shore. So that psalm, that lament it's an invitation for us to think about our lives, our personal lives, but also then think about the world in general and think about moments or situations that you feel are worthy of lament, worthy of crying out. Now, a couple things that I want to lift up to you about this psalm that I shared. So, the translation that I read, it says, plunge into the ocean of love where heart meets heart. So if you were reading it from a more standardized translation like the New Revised Standard Version, which is a favorite of mine, it would begin like this. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down and there we wept when we remembered Zion. On the willows there we hung our harps, for there our captors asked us for songs, and our tormentors asked for mirth, saying, sing us one of the songs of Zion. How could we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? If I forget you, O Jerusalem, let my right hand wither, let my tongue cling to the roof of my mouth, if I do not remember you, if I do not set Jerusalem above my highest joy. Remember, O Lord, against the Edomites, the day of Jerusalem's fall, how they said, tear it down, down to its foundations. So those are just some of the verses. But what I invite you to think about is that by the rivers of Babylon. Now, if you weren't really aware of the context, you would think, oh, it's a river. Like, I live by the Mississippi River. That's a big river. I can imagine what it feels like to sit by a river and watch the water go by and how that might be comforting to me. But if we're actually thinking about the context in which this psalm was written, we would be reminded that this is about exile in Babylon. And Babylon sat on two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. And between the two rivers were a series of canals. So John On, who's a biblical scholar from Howard University Divinity School, he translates rivers as irrigation canals. So now, if you think back on that verse, does picturing the captives sitting beside a river under a willow tree make that situation sound so romantic? Does it sound more lamentable if it's captives sitting by irrigation canals? So again, think of your context. And again, I live by the Mississippi River and the St. Croix River, and they're nice rivers to sit by and sort of calming and soothing. Um, it would be a different experience if I were sitting by an irrigation canal. So that's why it's helpful to have that whisper of context when we're thinking about the Bible and thinking about specific texts. Now, one of the other things that I really think I should lift up to you is that the psalm actually turns memories of Babylon into memories of Jerusalem. And what we notice then is that the memory brings hope. The people promise again to be faithful, and they think about the hardships that should come upon them if they're unfaithful. If the psalm is spoken by musicians, the withering of their right hand would impede their ability to play their harps in the future. So again, thinking about the way our text says, we hung our harps there. So that makes more sense when you're thinking about a musician and what a punishment of having your hand wither would be. It's a really interesting juxtaposition that invites us to think about not only things that are life-giving, but things that might be painful if they are taken away from us. So before I lose you, because I only have about 2 minutes left, I try and keep these to 10 minutes. So one of the things that's helpful is to think about lament as something that can be both individual but also community oriented. Or a person can lament in the midst of community. So it's this great, interesting place where we can not only lament personally, but we can lament because of the community we live in or the situation that our state or nation is in. It's one of those places where we're invited to think about not only are the people who are living in Babylon, these exiles, think of all the things that they're missing in their life. They're missing their routine, they're missing their home, they're missing their place to worship. So if we put that into our context, what are the things that would be just as painful for us? Not might be painful, but what are the things that are painful for us? What are the ways that we can cry out to God and say, we're struggling? We need your intercession. We need you to walk with us, to comfort us, to hear our songs of gratitude as well as our songs that are cries because we are so sad. And I think that's the intersection that I find myself at today. I find myself thinking about not only the people in this community that don't have enough food or have somewhere to live, they're housing insecure and they have food insecurity, I think about the animosity that's been created as a result of the election. And I think about the violence to people of color. I'm reminded that my call as a person of faith is to do what I can, not only to be a person of action, but also be a person who's in conversation with God. And so I invite you in this season of winter and cold, don't let it be a season of despair for you. Reach out to one another and reach out to God. Thank you so much for joining me today. I will look forward to visiting with you again next week. Bye bye.